on the Comey leak and using Daniel Richman and all this,
sure.
Let's talk for a minute about to whom we believe they were leaking. And that's Michael Schmidt of the New York Times, the guy who won Pulitzer Prizes for his Russiagate reporting. Just today.
And some other reporting, too, in fairness to him. It wasn't all Russia. He won a second. Yeah, I think he won 2 Pulitzers in 1 year, something for something else. But he's one of the members of that team that President Trump is suing over that Pulitzer right now.
So just today, the New York Times' daily podcast, The Daily, took on the Russiagate, or as Molly Hemingway is calling it, Obamagate stories that have broken since Tulsi started making these releases. She's right. She's totally right.
She is.
So they finally got around to covering it on the New York Times. Like, is this a story or isn't it? I mean, I'll give you one guess what they concluded. But guess who they bring on to tell us all there's no there. No one did anything wrong. This is all made up. And we don't need to be looking into this really any further. Michael Schmidt,
I bet. Yeah, doesn't surprise me one bit. Yeah,
it's all over your documents, your reporting, Molly's reporting. Michael Schmidt was used by the administration as their stenographer, the Obama administration, as their stenographer to get these stories out there. This guy, Daniel Richman, was talking to Schmidt for Comey, and yet I didn't hear a word about any of that when Michael Schmidt was on today's New York Times podcast. Here's how he sounded instead, John Solomon. Listen to this.
In the aftermath of Trump winning the 2016 election, it was widely understood that Russia had meddled in the campaign. And they find that Putin tried to hurt Hillary Clinton and help Donald Trump. But for Trump, this document, this assessment, was the original sin. Because what it did was cast doubt on his victory. What Gabbard is starting to do is declassify documents that she claims irrefutably prove that not only is the assessment a bunch of nonsense, but it's at the heart of a criminal conspiracy. So she releases a classified report that Putin was not trying to help Trump and hurt Hillary Clinton. There's nothing in that report, like an email from Obama to his intelligence community saying, I don't care what the evidence shows, we need to get Donald Trump. She is making this out like the smoking gun. When it comes to Russia, Trump will always be the victim and he will always be the hero.
With his supporters, he says. And he dismisses that House intelligence report that she just declassified, the one that was found in the safe at the CIA's headquarters, as that was all Republicans. You can't put any stock in that.
That's right.
And this is all BS. None of these allegations has been sustained.
Michael Schmidt's comments don't reflect the New York Times the way they would have reported a story in the 1980s or 1990s when I was coming up as a reporter. And I want to tell you a story because it's out there in the form of the Columbia Journalism Review and another great reporter who worked at the New York Times for 3 decades, won multiple Pulitzers, as I recall, Jeff Gerth. He did a reevaluation of how the New York Times and Washington Post got snookered on Russia. And it was done in the Columbia Journalism Review, which is painful because the Columbia Journalism Review sits right alongside of the Columbia Pulitzer Prize Committee where it is there. But he laid bare some of the most extraordinary moments in the failures of reporting in the New York Times. Yeah, they got a Pulitzer, but did they really cover a scandal? Did they really do the public a favor? There's a very important episode, and I have personal experience with it, so I want to hone in on it because it's how I see myself different from Mike Schmidt. A lot of people said to me early on, John, why didn't you do a lot of reporting in October, November, December, January, and February of 17? You only click in March and start raising questions about this. And the short answer is I did do some reporting. I had gotten some intelligence pushed to me by people close to the Clintons. And I went to the New York Times, I went to the FBI's press office, not Daniel Richman, but the career people who are trained to tell the media what they're allowed to tell the media about FBI matters. And they told me flat out, John, yeah, we're looking at this, but right now there's no there there. Ironically, that's the same line that Pete Strzok would later use in his text message. No big there there. And we looked at some of this stuff. We think the Alpha Bank things are pings. And we think that the other stuff might just have some political election stuff tied to it. So I stood down.
This just to be clear, this is somebody trying to get you to report that Trump is a Russian asset, or there's some sort of collusion, and Russia and Trump are colluding to win the election. And the FBI originally is telling you there's no there, John. Okay.
October 31st, 2016, the FBI tells the New York Times the exact same story. They write a story basically saying this stuff isn't true. And then somehow it magically becomes true over the next 6 months in the New York Times. And I ask myself, hey, it is possible that the career people I talked to in the FBI lied to me, but I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is every time I would call back and check with them in January, in February, March, because I'm starting to see the hyperventilation of the Washington Post and the New York Times, the career people inside the FBI, the people trained to know what the FBI is doing and to try to give the most accurate answer they can to the media without violating the law, keep saying, John, our answer stands to you from October. It's not true. Alpha Bank's not true. We don't think the Steele dossier is uncorroborated. We looked at it. It's uncorroborated. It's unfortunate that BuzzFeed put it out there. So I have to ask myself, was Michael Schmidt and the New York Times talking to the same people I was? Because history showed those people were right, and the New York Times and its breathless coverage are wrong. And there's one story that bothers me. The most early seminal moment in my career as an AP reporter was at the very beginning of the internet era, when the Wall Street Journal, in the middle of the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky scandal, broke a story off cycle. They weren't going on print edition. They did something on the internet. It might have been the first time. We're talking like 1997, 98, really early. We weren't used to the internet then, and most newspapers had a 24 cycle, or you just did it once a day. So they break a story in the middle of the day saying that a steward told the grand jury, Ken Starr's Whitewater prosecutor grand jury, that President Bill Clinton was found in a compromising position with Monica Lewinsky in the White House theater, I believe it was, a bowling alley or theater. And, I'm at the AP. My job is, you better get that fast and match it, Solomon. So everyone tells me it's wrong. To my credit, my boss is a great news leader named Sandy Johnson. She stood by her reporters and didn't make us report it. We eventually wrote a story saying it's been knocked down. It's not true. The Wall Street Journal withdrew that story. On its front page, they retracted a story that they'd put out wrong on the internet. The New York Times in February 17 writes a story basically to the effect of that the U.S. intelligence has proof that Donald Trump's campaign was talking to Russian intelligence campaign about hijacking the 2016 election. That story is, and never will be true. It has never been retracted. In fact, James Comey even said the story wasn't true in some testimony after he left as director. The New York Times has never retracted that story. Yeah, they've written stories having people criticizing it, but history has shown that story is wrong. It should be retracted. Those are the differences between the way you and I practice journalism and the way they continue to practice journalism today.
The other reporter whose name has come up time and time again is this Ellen Nakashima, who is with the Washington Post, and she appears to have been on the receiving end of these same leaks or related leaks.
Sure.
She was all over the news during the relevant time frame, pushing her BS reporting. Here's just a sample of that.
The topic of the Kremlin's influence operations has a particular resonance for me because in June of 2016, I broke the story of the Russian hack of the Democratic National Committee. And I distinctly remember at the time that this was a big, front page story, sort of Watergate, the Watergate break-in all over again, but in the information age. It's not just the Russians that exploit all of this. We have internal domestic actors that put out divisive messages from the left, from the right, and Russia amplified those messages.
When I talk to people inside the government, the sources, it's not even per se to have someone, oh, please leak me something classified. No, it's more this. The value I get as a national security reporter is in the relationship built up over time, one of trust, in which I find I have developed, a relationship with someone I consider to be authoritative and knowledgeable and well-meaning, and who, if they have trust in me, can explain some things in terms of context, history, significance, not so much an actual, operation or something really highly classified, but rather the history behind things.
So what about her, John? Do we believe she was also on the receiving end of the Jim Comey leaks, or possibly the Adam Schiff leaks, or where?
In disclosure, I worked with Ellen when I was at the Washington Post. I didn't find her anything but a professional reporter in the newsroom. The documents I saw yesterday show that she published classified information, and they couldn't determine who the provider of that information was. Now, I want to point something out in the documents I published this morning, which are the ones that went to the Capitol Hill. And you will see that there's large blacked out sections of some of these memos, large blacked out sections. In fact, the most tantalizing one is something to the effect of, Mr. Richmond told us, James Comey told him not to leak, but, and then it's all blacked out, the but. And you're like, what is there? I think I know what might be there. And unfortunately, the Trump Justice Department, Trump 2.0 Justice Department, made some redactions to these documents. They may have a legitimate reason. We're trying to press through and negotiate and see if there's some way for the American public to see this. But I believe in some of these blacked out areas, there are two more lieutenants of James Comey, not named Daniel Richmond, who may also have acknowledged their role in the leaking campaigns. And I think we should wait and see if we can get that information released by Pam Bondi or the Justice Department. If it can be lawfully released, I think it will create a more 360-degree stereo look at how Comey operated and how some of these leaks operated over time. Again, just because a reporter got a classified leak doesn't mean they're a bad person. I once got one of the most classified stories in the history of this country.
No, getting the leak doesn't. Getting the leak doesn't. Getting the story wrong and never correcting it does.
That's right. That's exactly the thing here. And I haven't done an evaluation of Ellen Nakashima's reporting yet. I certainly am going to now, based on these new documents, because she's a new sort of figure in this. I will point out something about the Washington Post. And for a period of time when my old Associated Press colleague, Sally Busby, was there, I think they tried to clean up some of their Russia reporting. They did about 12 or 13 appendages and corrections to stories. And Sally, I worked with at the AP. She was trained, I think, like you and I were, which is we stick to the facts. And when we get it wrong, we admit it. There's nothing wrong. The only thing wrong is not admitting you were wrong when you are. And so there was a period where the Washington Post cleaned up some of its reporting. But about 4 months ago, I obtained a document I believe it's under FOIA. I got it. And it is the confidential interview of the NSA director, Mike Rogers, saying that one of the Washington Post Pulitzer winning stories that claimed that Donald Trump said something to Mike Rogers during their meeting that was incriminating, Mike Rogers said was, quote, wrong. The story is wrong. And he debunks it in detail in an FBI interview, which means he probably wasn't the source of the Washington Post story because he was pretty critical of it. I went to the Washington Post. Sally Busby's no longer there. And I got crickets when I asked them, are you going to correct this story? I check back every few weeks. I haven't seen a correction. That is a problem, just like the New York Times story from February of 2017 is a problem. And I think now I don't know if that's an Ellen story. I have to look. I don't think it was, but your point is right. When you don't correct when you're wrong, you've really disturbed the public.
Ellen's stories are about, for example, the Russians hacking the Democratic National Committee, which now it appears is wrong. It does not appear that they were necessarily behind that leak, or at least now we have information that it wasn't them on that particular leak.
Yeah. I really want to address that because it does get, even in the conservative media, it gets gobbled up a little bit. Everybody I've talked to, critics and believers in the intelligence community, believe that John Podesta's emails, which were not the DNC emails, were hacked. And there's pretty good reason for that. And the FBI had prima facie access to the evidence. They could actually see what happened with John Podesta's email. So the Russians were involved in that. That's an influence operation. By the way, not uncommon. The Russians are famous for this, so are the Qataris. Many countries do this. The DNC hack is much more problematic for several reasons. On James Comey's watch, the FBI never demanded to get the servers from the Democratic National Committee. Instead, they used its former cybersecurity chief and his company to evaluate the servers for the FBI and give them an analysis. And then that analysis was put out to the American public saying, based on what CrowdStrike, this vendor hired by the DNC, gave us, we believe there was a hack of the DNC servers. About 4 years ago, as Bill Barr was leaving, we were able to get the actual interviews that CrowdStrike's people did with the FBI. And in that interview, they said something very profound that has never been disputed since, which is the Russians gained access to the DNC servers. They did some probing. They did some escalations of credentials, meaning I hacked my way in. I could get myself to administrator level. But what CrowdStrike said that I think is so important for all of us to understand, that is a form of hacking. If you get to credential level, you've hacked yourself in. But what CrowdStrike said is they could never prove, there was no evidence of exfiltration, meaning that the Russians, after they got their permissions on the servers, they didn't pull the data off and get the emails and leak them out. Now, that is a very important qualification. There was some hacking. They got into the system, but CrowdStrike is very specific that we couldn't prove exfiltration occurred. Now, compare that to what the Washington Post and New York Times and others reported, and it's a little muddled, and I think that that's one of the stories we got to get fixed in the next few months.
So what do we think the effect of the sparring between President Donald Trump and the Fed is going to be? Can the Fed take the right action at the right time? Do we trust in that? Or are we going to be looking at a potential economic slowdown as they slow roll any of their moves as they worry about his tariffs? And what exactly does all of this mean for your savings? You might want to consider diversifying right about now with gold through Birch Gold Group. For decades, gold has been viewed as a safe haven in times of economic stagnation, global uncertainty, and high inflation. And Birch Gold makes it incredibly easy for you to diversify some of your savings into gold. If you have an IRA or old 401k, you can convert that into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, or just buy some gold to keep it in your safe. First, get educated. Birch Gold will send you a free info kit on gold. Just text MK to the number 989898. Again, text MK to 989898, and you'll start the process of just getting the 411 on what it means to own gold. Consider diversifying a portion of your savings into gold. So if the Fed cannot stay ahead of the curve for the country, at least you can stay ahead of the curve for yourself. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.